Imagine this. You've been walking for 10 minutes. Your pace is steady. You're not out of breath. You're not drenched in sweat. Your stomach looks exactly the same as it did before you left the house. And a quiet doubt creeps in. Is this even doing anything? If you can't feel fat burning, is it actually happening? Here's the truth most people never hear. Your body does not burn fat based on what you feel. It burns fat based on biology. From the very first step, your body is using a mix of fuels. Some of it is sugar, some of it is fat. That part might surprise you. Fat burning does not suddenly turn on at a magical minute mark. The real question is not, when do I start burning fat? The real question is, when does fat begin to take the lead? Because there is a shift, not a dramatic switch, not a sudden explosion, but a gradual, measurable change in fuel dominance. And that shift does not happen in the first few minutes. If you stop too early, you may never give your metabolism the time it needs to transition. So what exactly is happening inside your body during those first 10 minutes? And when does the balance finally tip towards stored fat, especially the dangerous fat deep inside your abdomen? Let's break it down step by step. In the first 10 minutes of your walk, your body takes the most efficient route available. It reaches for what is easiest to access: stored glycogen. This is sugar that has already been processed and packed away in your muscles and liver, waiting for movement. It is fast. It is reliable. It requires very little adjustment. Your heart rate begins to rise. Blood flow increases. Oxygen delivery improves. On the surface, it feels simple, almost effortless. But underneath that simplicity, something important is happening. Your body is not ignoring fat. It is still using some. It always does. Even at rest, fat contributes to your energy supply. But during these early minutes, sugar carries more of the load because it can be mobilized quickly. If you recently ate, insulin is still present in your bloodstream, and insulin gently signals your body to prioritize available glucose before tapping deeper reserves. This is not a failure state. It is a warm-up phase. Enzymes involved in fat oxidation are beginning to activate. Blood vessels supplying adipose tissue are opening more fully. Your metabolism is preparing for a potential shift. But preparation is not the same as transition. If the walk ends here, your body never has to make that shift. It simply uses what is convenient and stops. The real transformation begins only if you continue. And somewhere between minute 10 and minute 20, the balance starts to move. Part 3. Minute 10 to 20. The shift in fuel priority. As you move past the 10-minute mark, subtle changes begin to accumulate. Muscle glycogen is no longer at its starting level. Insulin levels gradually decline. Stress hormones such as adrenaline and noradrenaline rise slightly, not to create panic, but to mobilize energy. This is where the story changes. Your body begins increasing the rate at which fatty acids are released from storage. Not dramatically, not explosively, but steadily. You might notice something small, a mild heaviness in your legs, a brief dip in comfort, a moment where your stride feels less automatic. Many people misinterpret this. They assume they are getting tired. In reality, your metabolism is negotiating a new balance. Sugar is no longer carrying the same percentage of the workload. Fat is being invited to contribute more. Mitochondria inside your muscle cells are increasing their reliance on fatty acids for fuel. There is no audible click, no internal alarm, just a gradual tilt. This is the beginning of fuel reprioritization, not the peak of fat burning, but the moment when your body starts depending less on what is immediately available and more on what is stored. And if you keep walking, that dependence grows. The question is not whether fat is being burned. It is how much of the total energy demand fat is now responsible for. And that answer becomes much clearer after the 20-minute mark. Once you move beyond the 20-minute mark, something subtle but powerful begins to take shape. Your body has now spent enough time in motion to move past convenience. It can no longer rely primarily on quickly available sugar. It begins leaning more heavily on stored fuel, not because of a timer, not because of a magical switch, but because demand has been sustained. At this stage, fatty acids are flowing more freely into the bloodstream. Muscle cells are drawing them in at a higher rate. Inside the mitochondria, fat oxidation is no longer secondary. It becomes a major contributor to the total energy output. This is what people often call the fat-burning zone. But it is not a zone you enter with intensity alone. It is a zone you earn with duration. When your pace is moderate, steady, and continuous, the percentage of energy coming from fat can rise significantly. And here is where it becomes especially relevant to visceral fat. Visceral fat, the fat stored deep around your abdominal organs, is metabolically active. It responds more readily to hormonal signals that encourage fat breakdown. When insulin remains lower and movement is sustained, that deep fat becomes increasingly available as fuel. Not exclusively, but meaningfully. You may not see a visible change in the mirror after one walk. You may not feel dramatic heat in your abdomen. Yet internally, the balance has shifted. Your body is no longer borrowing energy from what was recently eaten. It is drawing from what has been stored. And the longer you maintain this steady demand, the stronger that pattern becomes. Part 5. Why visceral fat responds differently. To understand why this matters, we need to look deeper than appearance. Not all fat behaves the same. Subcutaneous fat, the kind you can pinch under the skin, tends to be more resistant. It is designed for long-term storage and insulation. Visceral fat is different. It sits around your organs. It has a richer blood supply. It is more hormonally sensitive. When stress hormones rise slightly during steady movement and insulin remains controlled, visceral fat is often mobilized efficiently. It releases fatty acids into circulation more readily than many subcutaneous stores. This does not mean it disappears first every time, but it does mean that sustained moderate activity can target the kind of fat most strongly linked to metabolic risk. And here is the deeper insight. You might not notice your waist shrinking immediately, but inside, inflammatory signals can begin decreasing. Insulin sensitivity can begin improving. Metabolic markers can shift before your reflection does. Fat loss is not just cosmetic. It is biochemical. And when you walk long enough to sustain that internal shift, you are influencing processes far more important than appearance alone. At this point, you might be thinking, if this shift really happens after 20 minutes, why do so many people walk every day and still struggle with belly fat? The answer is rarely effort. It is usually timing and intensity. Some walks are simply too short. 10 minutes here, 12 minutes there, enough to feel productive, but not long enough to sustain the metabolic shift. Other walks are too gentle. If your pace never challenges your cardiovascular system, your energy demand remains low. And when demand is low, your body has no reason to significantly increase fat contribution. There is also another quiet factor: fuel availability. If you are constantly snacking before or during your walk, insulin levels stay elevated. And elevated insulin makes it harder for stored fat to be released efficiently. It is not that walking does not work. It is that the internal conditions were never aligned long enough for fat to take a meaningful lead. Think of it this way. You approached the doorway of metabolic transition, but you stepped away just before walking through it. Consistency is not just about how often you move. It is about how long you allow the shift to unfold. Part 7. How to know you are in the fat adaptive phase. So how can you tell, in real life, that your body has moved beyond convenience fuel and into sustained fat contribution? It does not feel dramatic. It feels steady. Your breathing deepens, but you can still speak in short sentences. Your body feels warm, not strained. Your movements become rhythmic rather than forced. There is a subtle calmness. The early stiffness is gone. The slight resistance from the transition phase has passed. You feel as if your body has found its pace. This is not exhaustion. It is efficiency. In this state, Your energy feels smoother, less spiky, less urgent. You are not chasing intensity. You are sustaining demand. And this is often where the most meaningful metabolic work happens. Not in breathless sprints, not in dramatic bursts, but in deliberate, uninterrupted motion. When you reach this phase and remain there, you are giving your body the signal it needs to rely more heavily on stored energy. Not just today, but more easily the next time you walk. After understanding the mistakes people make, the next question becomes personal. How do you know it is working? Not in theory, in your body. The shift does not feel dramatic. It feels stable. Your breathing is deeper, but not chaotic. You can still speak in short phrases. Your body feels warm, not overheated. There is no panic in your chest, no burning desperation in your muscles. Instead, something else appears. Rhythm. Your stride becomes automatic. Your shoulders relax. The early stiffness has disappeared. You are no longer negotiating with the movement. You are inside it. And here is the unexpected part. The moment many people think they should stop is often the moment their metabolism has just stabilized. The first 10 minutes feel easy. The next 10 can feel uncertain, but after that, something smooth takes over. Energy feels less spiky, less urgent, less dependent on immediate fuel. This is often the phase where fat contribution becomes meaningful. Not because you are exhausted, but because you are steady. And steadiness is what your metabolism responds to. When you can continue at a moderate pace without strain, without gasping, without collapsing into fatigue, you are likely giving your body exactly what it needs to rely more heavily on stored energy. Not aggressively, not dramatically, but effectively. And that is the difference. So now we return to the original question. When does walking start burning visceral fat? Not at minute 5. Not suddenly at minute 20. And not because you felt sweat on your skin. The real answer is quieter than that. Fat burning is not an on switch. It is a shift in priority. From the moment you begin walking, your body is using a blend of fuels. But as time passes, as movement continues without interruption, as your pace remains steady, the internal balance tilts. What matters is not the first step, it is the sustained demand. Visceral fat does not disappear because of a single effort. It responds to patterns, to repeated signals that say, energy is needed, stored fuel is useful, keep releasing it. You will not feel fat leaving your body. You will not hear your metabolism change gears. But if you walk long enough, often enough, and with enough consistency to allow that internal shift to occur, you are quietly influencing the chemistry that controls fat storage and fat release. The mirror may lag behind. Your body composition may take weeks to visibly change. But inside, the process begins much earlier. Not with intensity, not with exhaustion, but with duration. And perhaps that is the most important insight of all. Walking does not burn fat because it is dramatic. It burns fat because it is sustainable. The body does not reward urgency. It rewards consistency. And the moment fat truly begins to matter is the moment you decide not to stop too soon.